Welcome back for another book review. Today we are talking about this one. So this is Brigid, History, Mystery, and Magic of the Celtic Goddess by Courtney, I think it's Weber, but we also have a town here called Weber, so I'm not sure which one it's supposed to be pronounced as, so something along those lines. This book is very appropriate for the day we're talking about this. I'm way ahead of my life. I'm recording this the same day you see this. It is Imbolc today. A day very often associated with this goddess. So this book is pretty much what the title says. It's all about this goddess. It goes through all of the various aspects of this deity. There are different stories. She is one of the very few goddesses that managed to not be able to get snuffed out when Christianity took over. And instead of being like, well, you can't celebrate that goddess, they were like, fine, I guess she can be a saint. And a really elevated saint at that. With some of the things mentioned in this book, she ends up kind of being like the midwife and almost like a foster mom to Jesus, so that was interesting. I don't know a whole lot about Christianity, never been my thing, but that was fun to read about. I don't particularly care about the Christian side of her personally, but it is interesting to note that her worship was not going to be snuffed out. It just evolved and changed, and so there are plenty of Christians who work with this deity as a saint, and there are plenty of pagans who honor her as a goddess, but there's kind of an understanding that it's the goddess. I would rate this book a 4 out of 5. I really loved this. I do wish, again, I'm hoping and just waiting for the book that's going to address the myths in a similar fashion as Neil Gaiman, because again, his book, Norse mythology, best way I've seen the myths presented ever, and I still haven't found that anywhere else. We give like these like super like pulled back view. I feel like we just need more authors to like write the myths and not really change them, but present them in an interesting way. I know it's a fine line, but a lot of times, much like in this one, the myths are so summarized and everyone's really shrunk down, and it's only a paragraph or two. Like, it's not really giving the context of a full story. Again, Neil Gaiman. In that, you know who the players are, and then it's a semi-continuous storyline, and you get different people introduced as you go, but like the way that myth is presented is very different than what you're going to find in this kind of a book, where it's just this little snippet and it's just a very brief, and that's how it's mostly presented. I'm just waiting for the day where the like deities and the characters involved actually matter and have a little bit of a personality and not just flat, which is how they're mostly always presented. That's one of my big things, and I know that it's not necessarily the author's fault. I would love to be able to have that change. Make the myths interesting. They used to be interesting, I'm sure, and now they're really just watered down and flat. That's really my only issue with the book. And again, it's not necessarily a problem with the author, it's a very common thing that we have. I just would love to have more, like, life to the stories. Other than that, it's a really good book. Like, it goes through in a very interesting way. Like, it obviously was very well researched, and yet also has a personal taste to every bit of it that you're like, huh. Like, pretty much anytime she mentions like a random snippet of story that involves the goddess, like, she has like these reflective things that you're supposed to do, and it's very intriguing. Because like there was one story in Brigid being the saint where like some dude was like kind of lusting after her, and like her way of handling it was to gouge her own eyes out so that he would no longer want her. Great message. And then he obviously was like, oh, again, and went off, did his own thing. And then she went to the river and healed herself and put her eyes back in place, whatever, and continued on her merry way. And the reflection tells you to look at that in our very much different viewpoint, modernly, of like sacrifices that you've made that other people might not understand, and like sit in the uncomfy of that, sit in that like, of course it's her problem that he's lusting after her and she's gonna be sworn to God, and it's her problem. It was interesting because she calls you out on the uncomfy that you're immediately feeling, and she has that for all of these random bits in here that I really loved. She also talks about like her as like a goddess that's like all of these different things, and again, a saint of all of these different things. And that she kind of has like a continuous vibe the whole time, but how it presents is like so different and yet so similar all throughout. It was really intriguing, and like it kind of gives you this like vibe very close to what I'm hoping from when, again, we compare with Neil Gaiman, but like long-term stretched out. And it was like you could kind of get this like sense of personality of how she was this great goddess and how she would have been like subtly been still doing the exact same thing while becoming a saint. Because like when I was reading through the various parts of her being a saint, which normally irksome, again, I'm not a big fan of Christianity, and so reading through that, I wasn't irked nearly as much as I was expecting myself to be. Still points where I'm like, yeah, not a fan of them. But like there was one where as a saint she went to this like pagan chieftain who's dying, and he wanted a druid there to like read him his version of a final rite. And she was like, well, they're like 2 days away. So she went out, instead of making a normal cross, she makes the Brigid's cross and brings it back. And then in some tellings, I guess like he's supposed to kind of convert over. But in the way that it's written in here, it's kind of like this subtle of like playing both sides as she's sitting there. And I'm like, that's her vibe. She appeases just about everybody, but also maintains her own sovereignty, which you don't find. Like, and it's so interesting. She talks about her origins, where sometimes as the goddess, she is like same level as Dagda. They're the two kind of main players. They kickstart everything. And yet in other ones, she is, when Dagda and the Morrigan, I know I say his name wrong. I'm trying to learn Irish, all right? It's a struggle. Duolingo and me we're battling it out right now for me to know how to spell, because I can barely spell in English. Spell check was my savior, but trying to spell in a different language, that's really fun. For words that they just introduced and they're like, spell it, and you're like, I don't know how to, I don't even remember the word. So cool. Like, I'm learning it slowly. Still don't know how to say words. So Dagda, because that's how it looks and reads if you read it in English for now. So anyways, him and the Morrigan hook up. Very popular story, told oftentimes around Samhain. And with their coupling, Brigid becomes a thing. And that in here she talks about how he's the god of life. Morrigan, obviously the goddess of death. So we have life, death, and then rebirth. And I thought that was a really interesting take on it. And I feel like the various things that are brought up from this book are just so well, like, presented. Like, I'm very intrigued. And, like, granted, I don't know a whole lot about the goddess Brigid. I kind of know her in a very modern pagan context. But, like, it was fun to see all of these different aspects of her. And it's not written in such a boring way. I'm glad Pagan Portals has all of their books, but they're really, really boring. Like, it's a very academic slant, and I feel like they really typically will seek out a lot of, like, again, the Morrigan books, and I've read a few others. They're really boring. But this presents the information in, like, such a, like, tangible way that you don't have to sit there and be like, oh, but the source material says. It doesn't do that nearly as much, yet still presents it. And it's just fun to read. You know, you get to learn about, like, this random cow that has red ears. That's, like, a thing. Like, there's just random little bits in here that I absolutely loved. I really think the author did a fantastic job. Again, only thing, and it's not necessarily a big problem, but for me, I just tell me her story as, like, a full story and, like, not boring. Give some life to it. It's hard. But some people can do it. It's a very particular skill that not a lot of people have and can translate this kind of a thing and make it work. But one day, perhaps somebody will do that. I don't know that I'm the person to do that. And like, apparently she did tweak some of the stories in here. They were much more palatable than some of them that I've read. I will give the author that. But still, it's still not that same that I got from Neil Gaiman. He was the first author that made me love mythology, and I've still been seeking it out other places ever since. Haven't found it yet, but one day I'm gonna just continue to hold out hope that somebody could do that, because he wrote it so good. So anyways, I would love to know your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. Hope you are having a fabulous Imbolc, whether you celebrate it today like me on the 1st, or you're celebrating it tomorrow on the 2nd, or you're doing a few days of celebration. Either way, I'm glad that I personally did my ritual earlier today because it was beautiful. It was sunny and it was great, and there's like a little bit of clouds, but it was warm and the rays were just coming out, and it was like, oh, because one of her things is that she's often represented as like the sun rays coming out of her, hence the like fiery arrow or whatever or something. She has a lot of names, but that's one of them. And so I was doing my ritual, and then now, just a couple hours later, it is gonna storm. It is dark, it is cloudy, it is rainy, it's preparing for the storms. And you're like, cool, it was feeling like a nice day, so I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that with it being all kinds of cloudy, it's gonna mean that spring comes. Because if you don't know, the old saying goes that if on Imbolc, much like Groundhog's Day, if it's sunny, it means more winter. From a pagan perspective, it is where the goddess of whatever goes and gathers more firewood so she has good weather, and then it's gonna snow for like 6 more weeks or better. And then if it's a cloudy day like today, she's just chilling and knows that she's got enough because winter's going to end. So I'm hoping that now that it's all stormy outside, it means spring is going to return. I'm ready for warmer weather. I'm ready for it to be nice. I'm ready for it to not be snow. So hopefully that's what it means. But with the morning being so nice, I don't know. Maybe she just wanted to enjoy her cup of tea, because I did give an offering of tea. So I'm like, maybe you just wanted a good morning and then the storm can come in. That's what I'm hoping. So anyways, long story short, I'd love to know your thoughts on this one and what you're doing for Imbolc in the comments down below. A huge thank you to my patrons. If you want to support me and get access to exclusive content, it is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I post every single day. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and blessed be.